All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here at Devox on the Deep Dive Days. And I hope you're all very excited to see the cool stuff we're doing with artificial intelligence in traffic science. So, mandatory corporate slide. I work for a company called Cegeka. We're a European-scale system integrator and application development company. We also do lots of data projects, your typical ICT services. I work in a department called Smart Cities, and we have two platforms that we built. That's our own products, our own IP. One is Capacity, that is to handle smart parking spaces. And the other is Mobilize, that's what I'm working for. That's our data-driven product for municipalities. And that's what I would like to share, what we're doing there in the next 50 minutes. But before we dive into all these details, quick look at the agenda. First, I want to discuss a bit the context of the problem that we're solving, and that will be of traffic modeling in traffic science. Next up is to discuss how people have been doing that without AI for the past decades. And then, of course, we will dive into the details, how we can tackle that problem with a big data and an artificial intelligence approach. Finally, I want to conclude a bit on the results that we're achieving, how people are using it, and also some of the lessons that we learned in the past years while building this product. So, what's the problem that we're solving? That's actually one that is a growing pain for many municipalities in Flanders, in Belgium, all across Europe, and that is that of traffic livability. As you all know, cities are growing, and cities are not growing in size. They remain the same area, the same amount of square meters, but the population grows, and there are studies from USO that say that by 2050, 70% of the people in Europe will be living in an urban area, in a city. You can imagine that if you put all these people together, that this is going to give some tensions, and that capacity for energy, capacity for living, capacity for mobility will come under tension. Because of course, if you live in a city, sometimes you also want to go out and have some fun, or go to work, or drop the kids off at school. So all these people want to move, and well, this is going to create some tensions on the road. Luckily, not all hope is lost, because cities have some influence on how people behave on the road and what kind of choices people make when making trips. For a long time, there was quite some fatalism with cities, like, the traffic jams are there, we can't do anything about it. But if there is one good thing we saw in Corona, is that with policies like advising more remote work, we were forced to do that. Cities realized that by discussing with the employers and discussing with people, you can have some effects on the choices that people make. So they have the tools, and the tool that they have is to arrange the road infrastructure. So they basically choose what part of the road is allocated to active traffic participants, like bicyclists or pedestrians, and which parts are allocated to the car. And then by making some small changes, for example, by making a two-way street a one-way street, you can start pushing away a bit of traffic and work on the balance. But of course, that's easier said than done. This can be small changes, like introducing a one-way street or closing a street, but some cities are ambitious. They introduce entire new circulation plans in their city. And well, we've seen that in Ghent, we've seen it in Leuven, we've seen it in Hasselt, currently in Brussels and Anderlecht. There's a lot of fuzz about it. So you want to predict upfront what the impact of these changes will be. And well, that's quite a challenge, because well, in order to make a statement about what the changes will be, you already need the data for today. What's the current situation? And there is a lot of mobility data, but it's not in the hands of the cities. It's in the hands of private companies like Google with Waze or with Android. They collect lots of data. It's in the hands of the telco operators or the parking operators. But it's all private companies, and it's not with the cities that need that data to build their mobility policy. Second challenge is that of expertise, because even if you have the data, we have to realize that the majority of the cities in Belgium and the towns in Belgium are smaller than 20,000 inhabitants. And you're basically lucky if there is somebody working at the town council who knows a bit about mobility. So even if you have the data, you don't have the expertise to do this analysis and to dive into the details, let alone to do an impact prediction of what will happen. Second problem is, of course, traffic is complex. There are no silver bullet solutions, because otherwise we would have deployed it already, obviously. So it's always tailoring to the specific situation of that specific district or town or city. And that also means that typically cities need like 3 to 4 iterations or attempts to get it right. And you can realize or you can understand that if you start messing around with the traffic situation in a district 3 or 4 times a year, well, then basically you've pissed everybody off that lives there, that works there, that has a shop there. So this is also quite a painful process for many cities. So end result is, it takes a long time to get results, to learn what's going on, and that's where the opportunity lies, obviously. What we want to do is we want to see if we can do this digitally, because if we can do digital experimentation and collect all that data up front, then with technology, we might be able to speed up this entire process. And you have to think that it's like 18 to 24 months from start to finish for like a bigger mobility project in a municipality. And that's something that we try to shave off at least 6 months by using digital tools. All right. So, how does technology help us here? Well, obviously the technological world is evolving every day. That's why we have such nice conferences to talk about these new evolutions. And okay, these trends are not new. There is lots of mobility data. We always say that the gates of big data in cities have been opened and they're not closing again, whether you like it or not. Every person with a smartphone walking around in the city is a walking sensor. Every connected car, and they are by law connected, is a driving sensor. So gigabytes of data are outputted by every traffic participant every day. So this will only increase, of course, as technologies like 5G or low-power wide area network technologies for IoT devices get more and more adoption. So the challenge is going to be tap into that big data stream. Then, of course, you have adoption of artificial intelligence. That's to start finding correlations and patterns in all that data. We have cloud computing, which allows everybody to hire or to spin up some machines to do these GPU trainings for AI models or to host all that data in an affordable way. But what is particularly an interesting trend also for mobility is that of citizen participation and citizen science. For example, in Flanders, we have a very nice project called Telraam. It's Dutch for counting window or abacus or something like that, but it's a wordplay. And basically, it's a small video camera that you attach to your window and it counts the traffic on the streets, and you do that as a citizen. So basically, whenever your city is planning some mobility changes, you can help them collect the mobility data and have your say in the project that's ongoing. And that's, of course, very interesting because cities want their mobility changes to be supported by the citizens. So we take 3 building blocks, this big data of mobility. We're going to use some AI to find patterns and correlations in that data. But then there is an important thing to say, an honest thing to say, that's a pile of data is just data. There are no insights. You all know the DIKW pyramid, data, information, knowledge, wisdom. You need to distill data up in order to learn something from it. Secondly, if you have some AI algorithms, well, it's just an algorithm, produces more data. If you want to interpret these algorithms and find what are causations and not correlations, you need to add business knowledge. So that's why we're very closely working together with academics and with field experts in order to interpret all these relations and all our AI models in order to bring this to the customer in a usable product. All right. But of course, the problem of predicting upfront the impacts of changes you want to make to the road infrastructure, that's a problem that people have been solving already for decades. That's not new. People have been doing it since the 60s. So how have they been doing it in the past? So how have they been doing this without a data-driven method? So the first type of model, traffic model that exists is what they call microscopic models. So that's where you're really going to zoom into a single area in much detail. You're going to draw like a digital map, like you see here on screen. You're going to put a bunch of cars and trucks and bikes on it, and you're going to program for every one of these agents the behavior. The probability that it takes a left turn is 5%. The probability that it overtakes another car is 20%. The following distance between two cars is 3 meters. So you can realize that you have thousands of parameters that you need to configure in order to have this kind of agent-based simulation. For the people who have noticed it, this is a simulation from India because they're driving on the on the left-hand side. So the idea is here basically in one form or another. You can have some more advanced systems that do that, that you have this agent-based simulation. Basically, you're like a god watching from above. You put all these cars on the road and you watch chaos appear. You can see the traffic jams appear, and then, you can see where the congestions are and where interventions need to be done. But you can realize already by this story that this is a lot of work. These are very expensive projects. I think that in Belgium, let's say about 10, 15 cities have these kind of models. There are like 7-digit numbers that you need to pay for it. It's years of work to tune it and to calibrate it. So that's not what's very often used. There are luckily some other types of models which look not in all this detail of individual cars, but they look, let's say, at a higher level. And then we get into what they call the mesoscopic and macroscopic traffic models. And the idea is here actually very simple. You are going to look at, for example, a region like Antwerp, and you're going to ask yourself, what trips are people making in the region of Antwerp? So you're going to look at, where do people live? What's the age pyramid in that region? So how many people are there between 20 and 55? How many people own a car? So you start stacking up statistics in order to figure out how many people will take a bike, how many people will have kids that they need to be dropped off at a childcare center or at the school. You will see how many people are employed, and by doing all these statistics, and again it's thousands and thousands of assumptions, you can have an idea of, okay, there are gonna be 250,000 trips in this area in the morning rush hour. The second step is, if you know this traffic demand, is that you will look at the infrastructure that's available, the public transport, the road network, the bicycle network, and you will try to match the demand by putting it on the road network, and again you will see where the problems arise. Obviously, because if you put a lot of traffic on the roads, there will be traffic jams. So some people will say, nah, but if there are traffic jams, I'm going to take the bike. So there is like an interaction between the traffic demand and the availability of road infrastructure. It's feeding back. So it's like a cyclical process you go through, a process of 4 steps, which is why this framework is called the 4-step framework. But this is a very popular framework. We've also adopted some aspects of this as domain knowledge in our platform. But you can also hear, again, lots of data needs to be put into it, lots of assumptions need to be made, lots of statistics about demography, about where people work, about how many people have a car. And, well, that's a bit where the opportunity for digitalization and optimization looms. Because you have basically a human, a traffic scientist, looking at all this data and finding the correlations themselves. Yeah, what we obviously want is we want to remove the human from the equation. Every AI presentation needs that kind of Terminator-style comment, obviously. So what we want is we want to have an algorithm, a machine learning methodology, that will find the correlations in this data by itself and learn how road infrastructure and weather conditions influence the traffic situation. All right. So that's a bit the premise of what we try to do with AI. So we want to use all this big data, train an AI model on it, so find correlations in that data, and then predict us what are, on a street network, the traffic intensities, so how many cars are per hour passing by, and where are the congestions, so where are people driving slowly. And then the promise of AI is, of course, that yeah, we can throw more data center at it, so we can find much more complex correlations. We can find it faster than humans can do. Traffic science takes a few years to do some studying. You can retrain a model. We retrain models every 2 months. So yeah, basically you always have up-to-date, let's say, comprehension of how traffic works if you do it this way. All right. So before we dive into some of the details of the data that we're using, I want to take one step back though, because before you start throwing data and AI together, you need to understand very precisely the problem that we're solving. So I've taken here the, let's say, military structure of strategy, tactics, and operations to think a bit about what problem do we want to solve here if we want to predict the impact of changes. Now, at the operational level, that's typically questions where you look at, for example, the morning rush hour. So you're like in the war room of the city, and you're looking at the morning rush hour, and you're saying, oh, this morning was a hell. What do we expect this afternoon? Do we already dispatch the police? Do we already start rerouting traffic with dynamic traffic signs? Those are typical operational questions. And with AI, you would solve them, for example, with a time series regression model. So that's time series modeling. To be fair, yeah, you can easily get 85–90% accuracy with that. We've done this too. I will show you some examples later on. But that's assuming that you know what has happened this morning and then basically building on top of existing time series graphs. The question is, continue the graph if you need to draw the future or predict the future. The problem that we're solving, given that we're going to make some changes to the road network, what will be the impact is of a different order. Because there is no prior data. If you change the road network, you close some streets, you make some streets one direction, you change some speed limits, yeah, it doesn't exist. You cannot measure it up front and continue like the timeline series or the time series like you did with the operational problems. So we need AI models that really have a more fundamental understanding of how traffic works in order to reason about, okay, but if you make these changes, then hypothetically speaking, I think that traffic will shift that way or that way. So it's a different order of problems. It's exponentially more complex. And then, yeah, the last one is a bit of a philosophical question, I think. Taking into account the demographic evolution and autonomous vehicles and electrification of the cars and demography changes, what will our society look like in 20 years? Love the question, but I'm not sure if we're ready yet to tackle that with AI. Probably you need first something like a general AI solution to tackle that. So we're working at the tactical level mainly. We also did some investigation at operational level, and I will show you some of these things, how we do that in a few moments. All right, so, okay, let's start discussing how to tackle that problem. I can already reveal the recipe for doing this is to use the mathematical structure of graphs on one hand, and to use deep learning from computer science on the other hand. So deep learning are neural networks. That's the domain of AI, where we try to mimic how the human brain works. All right, graph structures. Well, a graph is very simple. It contains some nodes, and it contains some edges. The nodes are the dots, the edges are the lines between the dots. And, well, if you talk about traffic, the nodes would be the intersections, and the edges would be the roads between the intersections. So if you look at a road network, it becomes very quickly clear that graph structures are the natural habitat or the natural environment to describe what's happening on road networks when it comes to traffic. Okay, I made here a very simple diagram. Very beautiful PowerPoint skills, as you can see. But in reality, it looks much more complex. So we're talking about hundreds of nodes and thousands of edges. So just FYI, these are quite complex graph structures. All right, next ingredient is deep learning. Deep learning, very well known for computer vision, for identifying with very high probability that people are combing their hair, for example. I don't need to explain to you the success of computer vision and deep learning there. You have plenty of algorithms that are very mature, that are used everywhere, like YOLO or ImageNet. basically, this is one of the success stories of AI. But the reason why we need some of these ingredients to illustrate why computer vision is suddenly appearing in a talk about traffic science, for that I want to zoom into a specific case of computer vision. And I brought here some examples from a paper from 2018, a few years ago. And here, these researchers, they trained an AI model, a deep learning network, to restore corrupted images. So here you see on the left-hand side, there is a lady with a red hat, and they put some random text on top of it. You feed this image to an algorithm, a deep learning algorithm, and you ask the network, please reproduce the original image. Okay, this is the result. Well, I guess that everybody would have recognized that. But I already see some people in the audience be a bit skeptic and say, yeah, but if I look at the head and it's red, so if I look at the surrounding pixels, I can probably do this myself too. Okay, fair point. Next one, this image. So I'm not sure if anybody can see what this image is representing. Okay, it's a koala bear. So obviously here, this trick of, yeah, I'll look at the neighboring pixels and try to infer what this image is about is not going to work. So what's really going on here is, to be clear, the network has never seen these images before, obviously. So these are completely new images that it needs to restore. So what's going on here is this neural network, this algorithm is looking at that picture and it's really understanding, hey, it's a koala bear. And I know what a koala bear looks like, so I can reconstruct that. Or it's a lady with a red hat, I can reconstruct that too. So that's showing the potential of these kind of algorithms to look also at a traffic pattern and say, hey, I understand this. These are some intersections and some roads, and hey, I've seen this structure before somewhere in my training data, so probably I can predict what intensities I can expect for traffic on such a road network. So, deep learning neural networks and graphs, mix them and you get graph neural networks. What's in a name? So, like many things in artificial intelligence, this was very hot topic in the 80s. Then suddenly for 20 years nobody talked about it anymore. And then I think in 2017 it again got some traction. So this is, well, I think a thing in computer science research, graph neural networks, for example, for social networks or citation networks, they're using the same methodologies to build AI models on top of that as well. We do it then for traffic modeling. All right, okay, we know the ingredients. So let's start building. First step is data. Everything with AI starts with data. So number porn slide, we have lots of data that we collect from parties like here, TomTom. We also work with Google and Waze. It's millions of data points that we bring into our data lakehouse every day. Some cities provide their own data. And the first step is to nicely harmonize all that data. So we have three types of data that we look at. Geospatial data. Basically, that's how are the road networks organized. Where are the people driving to, the points of interest, and where do they live? That's the demography data. This should tell you the traffic demand that we talked about a bit earlier. Next step is, on the right-hand side, we look at the counts. So how many people are we seeing on the roads and how many people are stuck in a traffic jam? And we also use things like number of cell phones to get an indication of how busy certain areas are, because the more cell phones, the more mobility that's going on. But I don't need to explain to you that if you have the same street topology, the same road network, and the same people who live there, and the same shops and the same workplaces and industrial areas, the traffic pattern in the winter on a snowy day is much more different than that in the summer on a nice sunny day. That's of course because in the winter people drive a bit slower, they leave more distance. So in order to understand for the same input data this difference, you also need that contextual data. Was it a nice day? Was there an event going on like a rock festival or a conference like Devox in Antwerp? Was there an accident happening, or was there planned or unplanned road maintenance? We need to feed all that data to the AI algorithm such that it can start finding correlations and hence predict the vehicle counts and the congestion data after investigating street topology, points of interest, demography, and the context. All right, so we use basically some standard literature graph neural network architectures for that. And then after a few days of training on Microsoft Azure, out rolls an AI model. So what do we feed to that AI model? The first input is we give it a street network. This can be the real street network of a city, or it can be the one with the changes that they want to make. We feed it a list of point of interests. Again, this can be the actual list of point of interest, so the shops and the workplaces in the city, or if the city wants to do some economic attraction or stimulate local merchants, you can just increase the number of butchers or bakeries and whatever, and see what the resulting traffic intensities will be. And we feed it finally also a list or a city demography description, and there the same. It can be the actual composition of the city demography, or if the city wants to attract more young people to the city, you just adjust the numbers, make the prediction, and in about 1 hour rolls out a list of traffic intensities for every street, this traffic flows, that you see the traffic patterns, and then also next year we'll predict also the congestion patterns for every street. And that is the way that we can support municipalities, because they have some scenarios in their mind to solve problems like too much traffic or passerby traffic. So they think, if we limit the speed, they will go away, or if we make a one-way street, we can push away the traffic a bit, or we can even block some roads. Fine, define a set of scenarios, feed them into the AI network, compute the results, you have the data, you have the numbers, and then you can see on the right-hand side, depending on the type of policy that you want to make, just pick the scenario that fits best. Some cities want to stimulate economically, so the cities need to be more reachable, so they might go for scenario 1, where there is a slight increase in traffic, but faster transportation times. Other cities say we want to give back the space, the roads to active road users, the bike and the pedestrians. They would go for scenario 3, less traffic, so we can replace some roads by parks and green. And that's basically the product that we have been building in the past 4 years. All right, so how do these AI models look like and what kind of results do they give? Remember this difference between operational and tactical models? We call those prediction and simulation models. Predictions built further on top of an existing time series. Simulation models answer what-if questions, so those are the more difficult ones. You see we've built an entire taxonomy of different types of models. I will skip these details for now, but let's first start at these operational models. What's the kind of quality that you can get by throwing some data on a pile? So I want to show you an example. So the example will be for a prediction for 36 hours in September. And you will see 2 curves. I think it's going to be shown as a blue curve and an orange curve. The blue curve are the measurements, and the orange curve is the prediction. And we will start with 15 minutes in the future. So you will see the orange curve runs slightly ahead, and then it basically looks like this. You see the orange curve go up, and then the measurements actually follow. So this was the first model that we built more than 3 years ago. And you can see, okay, these predictions, okay, I'll freeze the animation. You see these predictions, these peak values are very nice. It's very well predicted. Turns out that the 18th of September was a Wednesday. There are only 1/7 of Wednesdays in the data set, so that's why the peak at noon, there was a school nearby, is not accurately predicted. So we went to another model, next iteration, now we predict 30 minutes in the future. You see here we get like 95% match with predictions. If you go 60 minutes in the future, it's still 90%. I mean, it's not so hard if you keep tuning these models to get even to 80% accuracy of what happens in the future. All right, but these are these operational models. very interesting, but we want to look at simulation models. We want to predict the unknown, the things we cannot measure unless we make the changes, of course. And in order to illustrate the accuracy and the kind of models we built there, I'm going to take a case of the city of Borsbeek. It's actually close to Antwerp here, might even become a part of Antwerp in I think 1.5 years or something like that. So those who have driven here this morning know that this area of Borsbeek there's a lot of shortage traffic there. People are using it to avoid the congestions on the highways. So somewhere past year, they introduced a cut in one of the streets in the middle of a living area in a city district where many people and kids are living. They also introduced a one-way street, and they measured the before situation, and then they asked us, okay, can you guys predict the after situation? What do you think the effect will be if we make these changes? So this is what our data scientists came up with. On the left, you see the predictions, and you see we predict for every street the changes. And then on the right, you can see the measurements that were done afterwards. There you see also right away one of the challenges. Immediately you see that we have like 5 or 6 measurement points, but yeah, we have like perhaps 100 streets where we have simulations. So this is, let's say, the total overview. If you look into the details, also here you see accuracies of 85% for the best prediction, 65% for the worst prediction. This was one of the first models that we built, are easily obtained on such a network. So in general, using AI in traffic science, you can achieve, well, currently we are at, let's say, 70% for simulations, 85 to 90% for 2 to 4 hour predictions for operational models. Our target is to go to 80% accuracy for simulation models. And we believe that by combining all this data, this is going to be possible. Okay, so another example, city of Bruges. That's not a small city, a lovely city, but lots of people live there. They also had some questions and some challenges, lots of shortage traffic in some of the districts. We will look at that case in a moment. Lots of traffic in general. They wanted to improve the safety of bicyclists. They also had some questions around air quality. So Vito and EMEC were also involved in this project. And to discuss a bit this story about what we computed there and how you can use AI models to support cities here, we're going to travel to a nice district called the Vijversdreef. It's right outside the city center of Bruges. And you see it's a beautiful area, nice trees. It's happy living there. It was a nice day when the Google car was passing by there. But there is a problem in this beautiful story, and that problem is this big fat red line that you see here on the graph. There is a lot of traffic in the morning rush hour, southbound traffic driving through that very small street. So like 100, 150 cars per hour are passing by there that actually don't need to be there. So this is a problem that they have been trying to tackle already for several years. They did some interventions, but then some people were complaining. They did another intervention, but then the traffic was suddenly in another part of the district. So lots of trial and error, lots of people complaining and banging at mayors and deputies' doors. And mayors and deputies don't like people banging on their doors. So the mobility department was looking at our platform to see if they can solve the problem. And they knew what they wanted. So they want the traffic to use the main roads that are surrounding this district. So you can see here at the bottom, there is a national road, Steenweg in Dutch. You want the traffic to be there. And there is also a bigger road. If you look at the road structure, it's like very wide. There's lots of space there. In the middle, it's called Brieversweg, for those who know the area. They want the cars to be on those 2 main roads and then drive to the left in the morning rush hour in the direction of Bruges. So, ideation workshop, lots of good ideas come out. First idea is, let's cut the main axis. Just put some concrete blocks there and we'll see what happens. And then, okay, there were some one-way roads added. You can see the indications there. Question, what does this give? So this is a screenshot of the platform. So you basically get this kind of output. So you can see in red where the traffic increases. In blue, you can see where the traffic decreases. Yeah, and if you start clicking away, you see that, surprise, people will just take a small detour to bypass the cut. So apparently, the cut is not of a penalty enough to motivate people to stay more on this top axis, this Brieversweg. You see some people are moving there, so the traffic increases with 15 vehicles per hour, but the majority of the traffic just takes the detour. That's not good, not what we want. Traffic is still in the district, people are still mad, so not a good scenario. Okay, 1 hour of computation, that's quite fast to get these insights. Second scenario, more dramatic or more drastic. We cut the 3 main accessways to that living area. Fine, it's 3 clicks on our platform. I just added them up, introduce these 3 cuts, and then you see, well, okay, good. Obviously, there is less traffic going into the district, but you still see that there is like a main axis in the middle being used for all this traffic. Some traffic is being pushed away to the north already, so we see there plus 48 vehicles per hour at the top, but it's still not, it's only half of the traffic, so there's still going to be some unhappy people. And then you get a bit to the advantage of AI models. It's, okay, fine, just change the road network again, 2 clicks, make 2 more one-way streets. So we added those just for fun, press play, or press simulate in our case, and 1 hour afterwards, you get basically the output. So just start 5-6 scenarios in parallel, even if you're together with citizens discussing, and you will immediately get the output. And you see that this kind of scenario then succeeds in pushing all the traffic where it needs to be at the main axis and at the connecting axis between these 2 main roads. So basically in 3 hours, well, we have a scenario that can work for this district, thanks to big data and AI. All right, some closing words or some conclusions. So what did we learn while building this platform? This is something we've been doing the past 4 years. So my advice to anybody saying, I want to do a big project with AI models is, do not underestimate, first of all, the need for data. We had our first models in 3 weeks. So some data scientists on a laptop, some Python, some data, moderate accuracy. I put here the proverbial 70%. You have that in 3 weeks. That's not a problem. But if you want to scale up the complexity, especially in road networks, if the area becomes bigger, the computational complexity increases exponentially, and also the need for data increases exponentially. Yeah, it quickly becomes much, much harder. And then you get into all kinds of operationalization problems, like, okay, the training times also increase exponentially, so twice the data is factor 4 to 8 more training time. So lots of optimizations is necessary there. So don't underestimate the, let's say, operational complexity of going from 70 to 80% accuracy, and that's what the customers expect. They can build themselves. They also have some data scientists, typically for your average AI project. They have some data scientists in-house that have done the work of the 3 weeks proof of concept. It's like, how do you bring it to this 80% accuracy? That's the real challenge. So you need lots of data, and I can guarantee you it's very expensive to get that data. If you need to collect data at this scale, if you want to do it yourself, that's a 10-year project in itself. So we work very closely together with partners in order that are collecting for us the data, because they are driving around with mapping cars like a TomTom or a Here or a Google. So they sell all of this data. TomTom and Here are in every car that's driving around. Every connected car somewhere has some Here or TomTom components. They report nicely back to home base of the car manufacturer where you're driving. This data is then processed anonymously and sold to the market, just that you know. But this data is incredibly expensive. So in order to basically get that data, we had to go through several contract negotiations. The longest one took us 22 months just to agree on getting started. I mean, the first price they gave us was something like, yeah, we're going to charge you €1 million for this data for Belgium. Yeah, okay, Cegeka is not a small company, but we are our dedicated team with our own P&L. So €1 million was off the table. So you need to start thinking about, yeah, let's work together as a partner and we do some revenue sharing. And that's the kind of discussions that you need to have in order to get access to that data that you need to build good models. Also important, need for transparency. We had lots of skepticism from mobility experts in cities that simply said like, oh, what you're doing with the AI, yeah, it's impossible. Okay, then you show them simulations and you show them the measurements and you say, hey, you see 82% fit, we have like 10, 15 reference cases, and then they start realizing, okay, apparently it can be done. But the problem is, of course, that everybody in the field is familiar with their own way of working. It's taught at universities. It's the same methodology they've been using for 40 years. And then some hippies with artificial intelligence come about, and it's like, what are you guys doing? Secondly, inside these deep learning models, it's not very easy to see how these predictions are generated. Our data scientists have some beautiful explanations like, yeah, but in the latent features that this model is learning somewhere in layer 4, we see this being correlated to that, but for the mobility experts or the deputies of mobility, it's like, whoa, we have no idea what you're talking about. So it's basically a black box. And there are some promising advancements in the field of explainable AI. It's a hot topic everywhere, but to be fair, I think it's at a very early academic stage still. I don't see us applying this in the next years to explain why models are reaching certain conclusions about shifts in traffic. But customers are very much asking for that. Finally, willingness to share data, also challenging. We had some data partners that said, we love the idea, here's the data for free. Thank you. There were also some other ones that said, okay, so if you're going to build those AI models, basically you're obsoleting us. So you're cannibalizing on our profit and our revenue. Okay, that was factually incorrect. We cannot replace data collection just with AI. But that was the kind of reasoning that partner had. So again, 18 months of discussions later, finally you come to an agreement to share data. So that's really a big challenge. You need to think ecosystem, you need to think partnerships in order to build these projects. Of course, the advantages are big. So you have models that we can apply, because the road network is flexible, we can apply the same model anywhere in Belgium. So our target is to have 2 to 3 models, basically for small cities, medium cities, and then big cities like Ghent, Antwerp, Brussels, Liège, Charleroi. To have these 3 categories of models that work at these 3 scales. So it's not a model per city, so we're not maintaining 586 different models in Belgium, for example. The speed is a big advantage, and the fact that you can keep retraining this is also very nice to have. It's always actual. If we see more teleworking going on in our data, our models are learning about it. If we see societal trends about micro-mobility, more steps being used in a city, it immediately shows up in our data and in our model predictions as well. So that's the real strength of AI and big data approaches in a field such as traffic science. And then my last takeaway that I want to give to everybody who wants to tackle such a project is don't try to do it alone. My personal opinion is that such projects, trying to introduce AI models in an established field, you cannot do it alone, you need partners. So we work together with knowledge institutions, universities, we work together with the government, we work together with lots of private partners in order to do some research, in order to make this happen, to share the data, share some of the insights that we have, because it's simply too complex to do all by yourself. I think that for me is the core message, that is in order to improve our mobility in our European cities in the next 25 years, there's going to need to be a lot of collaboration. So I hope that everybody will leave here and say, okay, we're going to rock the world with AI, but we're going to do it all together. So that's it. Thanks a lot, and I'm open for any questions. Questions from the audience?
Yeah, why did you choose to train your model on actually manual changes to your network and not the model itself, training itself to make the most optimal route with the established?
Okay, so the question is, I think, why did we train the models with manual changes instead of the model finding automatically the most optimal work? So in fact, in our data that we collect, so we've collected data for the past 3 years, and there are already lots of changes that we try to simulate inside that data set. So for example, we have data from Kortrijk, Roeselare, Aalst, Herentals, Turnhout. So these are some cities that we're using in our modeling. And they have introduced in the past 3 years one-way streets and closed streets and changed speed limits. And in fact, our AI models are learning what the impact was on the roads network and on the intensities in those cities. But then that's what AI does. It understands the correlations, so it can transfer that knowledge to a new network or to a new situation. So in that way, it's, well, the manual interventions we do, that's just preparing the prediction stage of the AI model. In the training process, it's entirely looking at what changes do I see in the road network, in OpenStreetMaps, in TomTom Maps, in Google Maps, and what is the impact on traffic there. So luckily it's automated. I wouldn't want to be the guy configuring manually, oh yeah, there was a road closed somewhere in a small town near Brussels every day. So that's entirely automated. And building this entire data pipeline was a significant effort as well. Yeah. All right. Other questions? Yes? Yeah, so the question is, can these models also simulate impact on public transport if you add a bus lane or a tram line? In theory, yes. The challenge there is finding the data that shows you the impact. When it comes to public transport, the amount of users on a single bus or on a tram line, there is not structural counting of it, unfortunately. So there is data at Delane and Tech and STIP in Belgium. They have this kind of data, but it's like, yeah, manually collected. So there is, for some day, I don't know, in November, they have a single measurement for a few hours. But we need, like, I would say at least a year of data, of time series data, in order to find the correlations between, okay, adding a change like a bus lane, which is not something you do every day, that means that X amount of people will leave the car at home because the public transport is better. So in theory, our models allow it, but the challenge there is collecting the data such that the model can see that correlation. Okay. Any more questions? All right. I can highly recommend these follow-up sessions as well. They're about, especially on Thursday, some very interesting sessions on graph databases and graph science, so data science on graph structures, if you're interested in getting started with these kind of models as well. Thank you, and talk to you later.